Welcome to The Explainer. When we think of highly sophisticated hackers, we usually picture them going after banks or tech giants, right? But what if I told you that organized networks are basically reverse engineering a nation's entire legal software? Today, we're diving straight into exactly how these groups are actively exploiting structural vulnerabilities within France's asylum system, bypassing a process built on international law using meticulously rehearsed stories and completely untranslatable paper documents. Here's the roadmap for our investigation today. We're going to trace the side door phenomenon, look at the verification gap, break down the broker playbook, navigate the Dublin sieve, escalate to a massive 2025 security threat, and finally, look at who actually pays the price in all of this. Kicking things off with part 1, the side door phenomenon. Because, let's be honest, there is this massive, unspoken contrast between the public's perception of immigration and the actual reality operating on the ground. The official narrative tells us that asylum is this incredibly strict, heavily vetted front door, symbolized by the rigid bureaucracy of the French Republic. But honestly, the reality's a lot messier. Organized networks, specifically operating out of the bustling streets of Kathmandu, have mapped out a highly efficient side door, and it perfectly bridges these two completely different worlds. Now, publicly, the system points to its strict adherence to international legal obligations, which is designed to be perfectly fair to everyone. But that facade of fairness actually hides some massive structural loopholes. See, because France is legally bound to conduct individual assessments, meaning absolutely no blanket rejections, sophisticated fraudsters know exactly where the legal system is tied up. And more importantly, they know exactly how to pry those legal binds open. And here's the really fascinating part. There's actually this unspoken equilibrium that keeps this side door propped wide open. On one hand, France is facing a huge labor shortage in physically demanding sectors like agriculture and construction, jobs that irregular asylum seekers are more than willing to fill. But on the flip side, there's intense political pressure to look tough on uncontrolled immigration. So, ironically, having a slow, underfunded, bogged-down asylum process, that actually functions as a feature, not a bug. It keeps the cheap labor flowing in while still maintaining this outward facade of rigorous due process. Moving into Section 2, the verification gap. So how exactly are these brokers consistently slipping past French authorities? Well, it all starts at the origin point. When applicants arrive in France, they submit these incredibly compelling stories of persecution. But here's the catch. Those stories rely entirely on local records from Nepal. And in Nepal, those records are completely offline. We're talking physical paper documents written in Nepali script, authenticated by nothing more than physical ink stamps. Obviously, there is no magical central database that a French official sitting in Paris can just log into and verify. So you have this absolutely crucial vulnerability, a complete mismatch in data tracking. France is expecting real-time digital cross-checking, cryptographic seals, strict biometrics, the whole 9 yards. But the analog reality is, again, just hand-stamped paper. Pulling off fraud here doesn't require some master forgery skills. It literally just requires exploiting this massive gaping void between a digital European expectation and an offline, paper-based reality. Which brings us to part 3, the broker playbook. Because the organized networks know exactly how wide this gap is, and they've developed a highly repeatable execution phase to exploit it. We're not just talking about a few people sharing tips in a group chat here. This is a fully monetized coaching industry. Brokers are out there openly selling their inside knowledge of the asylum system. And guess what their platform of choice is? TikTok. No joke. They are literally live streaming how-to guides for illegal entry on an app that French asylum officers are rarely, if ever, monitoring. Applicants can just tune into a stream or drop some cash in Kathmandu to pick up fabricated police reports. And all of this builds into an exact, meticulously rehearsed procedural playbook. Step 1, erase your digital footprint. Just delete all your social media so there's absolutely no evidence of your perfectly safe life back home. Step 2, buy the fabricated paper documents with cold, hard cash. Step 3, rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. They use those TikToks and Paris-based guides to iron out any inconsistencies in their story. And step 4, exploit the Dublin regulation by traveling overland, effectively bypassing initial border fingerprinting. Because of this playbook, information asymmetry ends up peaking at literally the absolute worst moment possible. As an applicant scrubs their social media before arriving, their authentic digital footprint just plummets to zero. Meanwhile, their artificial footprint, built entirely out of those fake paper documents, spikes. So French authorities are forced to adjudicate these asylum claims at the precise moment when the truth is totally hidden and the fabrication is at its absolute peak. Now on to part 4, the Dublin sieve. Because to even get to that asylum interview, they actually have to physically reach French soil undetected first. Under the European Dublin regulation, an asylum seeker is supposed to be processed at their very first point of entry. But migrants bypass Europe's front door to create what's essentially a fingerprint void. They do this either by entering legally into countries like Portugal on seasonal harvest visas and then quietly moving, or by just taking overland ghost routes that completely bypass passport control. Without that initial fingerprinting, France has absolutely no way to flag the migrant as a Dublin transfer candidate. Which leads us into part 5, the 2025 security threat. Look, if this was all just a massive administrative headache, that would be one thing. But when verification is completely bypassed like this, the stakes escalate dramatically. Since the entire system basically relies on the applicant telling the truth about a past that cannot be verified, we really have to ask ourselves, what happens when violent criminals realize the side door is wide open? What happens when they decide to use this exact same playbook? Well, the answer lies in one frankly terrifying number: 15,000. Back in September 2025, sparked by huge Generation Z protests, Nepal experienced massive civil unrest. And during all that chaos, 15,000 prisoners managed to escape from 28 different correctional facilities. It was literally the largest jailbreak in South Asian history. And as of March 2026, 5,000 of those escapees are still completely missing. We're talking about individuals convicted of murder and organized crime. And intelligence shows they are filtering right into the exact same European smuggling routes we've just been discussing. France literally cannot distinguish between a genuine political refugee and a convicted murderer who just deleted his Facebook account, bought some fake threat letters, and memorized a TikTok script. The exploit works absolutely perfectly for violent fugitives. Finally, part 6, punishing the persecuted. This brings us to the really profound moral and human fallout of a hacked asylum system. The truly devastating irony of the side door is who the system actually ends up rewarding. The coached applicant arrives confident, with meticulously rehearsed answers and a neat little portfolio of untraceable paper documents. The system, which loves nice linear narratives, rewards them. But the genuine refugee? They arrive deeply traumatized, often fleeing actual war zones, and they definitely didn't have the luxury of stopping to gather perfectly stamped documents. Unable to deliver a perfectly calm, coherent narrative, the genuine refugee is met with systemic suspicion, and they just get stuck in endless backlogs caused by the coached applicants clogging up the pipeline. The ultimate victims here aren't just the French state. They are the people fleeing actual terror, forced to share a broken system with those who are just gaming it for economic gain. Organized networks aren't magical. They're just adapting to the verification gaps on offer. And until the massive gap between digital expectations and analog realities is closed, that side door is going to stay wide open. France and genuine refugees deserve a lot better. So the question I'll leave you with is this: does the political will actually exist to close the side door? Or is the current equilibrium just way too convenient to fix? Thanks for watching this explainer, and keep questioning the systems around you.